Within the app, users can click on a church attendance trends link to select a church or ministry area and adjust the date range accordingly. This provides a Sunday attendance graph with a red line showing how attendance has changed over time. There are green Excel icons that allow you to download all submitted data for the chosen time frame, not just Sunday service numbers, but all recorded activity. You can even add data retrospectively going back to 2024. In Monmouth, for example, some areas have used photographs of service books to help fill in the historical data, resulting in a more complete and meaningful data set. When we evaluate the data, there are a few important things to keep in mind. Thanks to an increasing number of churches using the app, our current sample size gives us a better estimate of actual Sunday service attendance. But to improve accuracy, we must ensure that all churches are represented. Some areas are still underreporting, and we suspect those are especially churches with lower congregations, and this may create errors in the projected figures. Encouraging consistent app usage in these locations is crucial to strengthening our overall projections. So based on current data, the projected average provincial Sunday attendance is 29,301 people. If you wish to ask me about error margins afterwards, please do. But this is broadly the same as the figures pre-COVID. And it suggests our attendance may be stabilising, but there is still more work to do. For your information, our methodology has been reviewed and validated by an independent statistician from the Church of Scotland, and they have confirmed the robustness of our processes, calculations, and results. As more churches engage with the app, our projections will become even more accurate, moving closer to a true picture of life across the province. While provincial and diocesan figures are helpful, the app is particularly valuable at a local level. We should not lose sight of its power to help track and evaluate the impact of local activities. You may wish to ask yourself, does your summer fete bring more people to Sunday worship? Has your after-school club affected Sunday school attendances? With this app, you can measure that and so much more. The data helps us understand what's working and identify crucially what isn't, and it will allow us to share these learnings across mission and ministry areas to help support growth and renewal. Finally, a call to action. For those of you who haven't not yet engaged with the app, I would encourage you to contact me or my colleague Helen, and we will happily talk through data and usage of the app outside of this meeting. Just catch me in one of the breaks. I'll be around all day today and tomorrow. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Now, we would like to encourage members to give feedback or ask any questions on the use of the app. The more feedback we get, the better it is for us to adapt the app and tweak it to work better for us. So if anybody would like to make comment or to ask a question, please make your way to the podium either side. Thank you.
Rebecca Sperry, clergy-elect St Asaph Diocese. In my previous life, before I was a vicar, I used to work as a software engineer for many years in the field of data analysis. I produced databases and statistical analysis for universities and hospitals. So on one level, I am really, really pleased that the Church in Wales has produced this tool to store and analyse attendance data. It was a tool I was really looking forward to using. As a mission area, we started using it back in 2023, and we've got service data filled in for the previous 2 years. And this year, and partly through last year, we started filling in all our other activities. On another level, using the app is really hard going. Data entry is clunky, it doesn't inspire people to want to use it, and I'm not convinced in the way the data is stored. For example, I hold a midweek service aimed at under fives. Very informal, crafts, Bible stories, songs and a prayer. Do I store that as a midweek family service where I can store the number of adults and children? Or do I put it as Messy Church where I can just store total people who attended? Why doesn't Messy Church track who is adults and who is children? Same with Forest Church. At present, the reporting is pretty much non-existent and is really quite unhelpful. And I know that is being looked at. I've recently reported that the latest data where they give you a massive spreadsheet misses out large chunks of data, because if you have a church where you've not had a Sunday morning service, it doesn't then bring back any activity in that church for that week. So all midweek Eucharists, everything is not returned to you. As a software engineer, I find it genuinely hard to comprehend how that got past testing. Data from mission area level services isn't returned in that data dump either, so all of our weekly online services don't appear at all. If you hold 2 Eucharist services in one day, for example, we have a Welsh Eucharist followed by an English Eucharist, it combines the figures and tells you the total number of people appearing. But we would actually like to track who's coming to the Welsh service and who is coming to the English one. There's little point in storing all this data if it can't be properly analysed for trends. I will, however, continue to ensure my mission area faithfully fills in the weekly data, because I am hopeful that at some point the reporting will become more meaningful. But I am concerned that the data being stored in the first place is not consistent, and without good initial data, you're never going to get good reporting.
Well, we asked for feedback. James?
James Henley, elected Monmouth chair, members of governing body, and Mike and the RB IT team. Thank you so much for what I know has been a really significant piece of work to develop the membership app that we now have. As Rebecca has said, I'm aware of lots of ways that could be developed, that we could get a greater ability to analyze the data, to compare trends to previous years, all of these kinds of things. But and I hope that over time features will continue to add to the app that we have. But for now, I simply wanted to say thank you for what I think is a huge undertaking, and the fact that we have something which we're able to make use of in every church and every mission and ministry area across the church in Wales. I also wanted to say a huge thank you in particular to our diocesan office team in the Diocese of Monmouth, because I think the way that our diocesan team has approached us making use of the app has helped significantly in the transition towards as many mission areas as possible, as many churches as possible, being able to use that app. Mike mentioned taking photographs of registers, and diocesan office staff working on inputting that historic data into the app for us. But there's been lots more help than that as well. We've got laminated bookmarks that go inside our paper service registers. The bookmark says, remember to update the app. Or, crucially, it says, if you can't get on the app, then WhatsApp your numbers to this mobile number, and someone from the diocesan office team will then put it into the app for you. And for me, I think that's a really crucial transitional measure to help us to get using that, particularly with our smaller churches, particularly where, for instance, there might be issues around ability and use of IT. Actually, for people to be able to just message or WhatsApp attendance figures to a number and to know that then those are taken care of, getting them into the app. It's not something that we'll need forever in terms of provision, because over time, the number of people we have who are competent and able to use the app will increase. But for the moment, it's helped us to get up and running much, much faster. And there's a huge commitment of time and energy from our diocesan office staff in order to enable us to do that at least in Monmouth. So I wanted to say a big thank you to our team, at least within our diocese, and hopefully some of what I've said in terms of the other dioceses might have been able to help in terms of ideas for ways to be able to boost the usage of the app, particularly in those areas that Mike mentioned, smaller churches, more rural areas, where there's a particular need to get those figures in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Monis Farah, St David's Diocese. Just two questions, simple questions. The first one is that the data that on the last slide was we are now at 29,000, just about 7% below what we were before the pandemic. Is there analysis of how many of these are newcomers or those people who actually we lost and haven't come back? Because there is some information out there to say some people stopped coming altogether. Are these new people that joined us, or are they our people who stopped are coming back? That's the first one. And the second one is, I'm not sure if I heard the exact number of churches and apps that the data is based on, because depending on the size of the sample, extrapolated will give us a better figure of the numbers that we have. Mike, this is great work. Thank you for you and your team for doing the work. It really is very helpful. It's just two simple data questions, really.
Any other further comments or questions? It's the last time of asking. Can we just do a straw poll of those people who are currently using the app that are members of governing body? Thank you. And those who aren't? Thank you. Mike, I'll give you the right to reply.
I'll start with the easy question first. Monis, thank you. There is no analysis at the moment of whether these are new or older people from pre-COVID, but that is obviously something that could be taken forward. And in relation to the sample size, it's currently 30%, ever so slightly over. It's a slightly different representation of all the different dioceses, but if you'd like to grab me afterwards, I'll show you some interesting spreadsheets. James, thank you, very kind words, and where are you, James? And I appreciate your usage of the app. And as someone who's worked in IT for 30 years now, I'm very used to robust and honest feedback, Rebecca. Thank you very much indeed. The only assurance I can give you from an IT perspective is that the data tables that collect the data are sound. I take your point about the reporting mechanisms. There is some work that is required there, and I'll definitely feedback that back to the developers. Bear in mind, this is just version 1, so there's work to do. Thank you again.
Thank you. We move then to Agenda 8, a report from the Diocesan Learning Community held last November, and I will ask the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon to introduce the report, and Mr James Lang, the Diocesan Secretary of the Diocese of Llandaff, will introduce the ministry area survey that was undertaken last autumn. Bishop John.
Archbishop Chair, members of governing body, John Lomas, Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, ex officio. You have amongst your papers a report which provides information about the learning community and the work that's been undertaken since. You've also been given the digest report of the learning community, which goes into more detail about the event itself, including sessions, contributions, discussions, and that was prepared in November, shortly after the event. I don't propose to talk through the digest report in any detail. It's there for your information and for you to read, but I will draw out a few significant points in particular. Each of the learning community's sessions aim to relate to particular areas of ministry area life, with the agenda being formed, as you'll see from the first page in the report, in response to a batch of reflections on ministry areas from bishops, archdeacons, diocesan secretaries and lay and ordained people in ministry areas. There were sessions not just on administrative matters, but on culture, on identity, on vocations and well-being, to try and give a wide range of angles on ministry area life, as wide a range as we could in 24 hours. Pages 4 and 5 of the Digest report set out the ideas and main points of discussion. These won't all necessarily make their way into reality, we know that, but there were good discussions which generated ideas which may go forward in the future. On page 2 of the Digest report, you'll see that sessions 3 and 4 were focused more on the nuts and bolts operational matters relating to buildings, relating to administration, etc. Alex Glanville, in his new role as Director of Property Strategy, introduced his work in developing a provincial strategy for buildings and the work he'll be doing over the coming few years in relation to this. Pages 2 and 3 of the Digest report, they set out the details of a session led by Archdeacon Stella, and the title of that session was "What Should a Healthy Ministry Area Look Like?", for which everyone sat in diocesan groups, and then there were summaries of feedback from those discussions, and the summaries are included. You'll see also that Bishop Tim Thornton was in attendance as a critical friend in a reflector role for us all. He provided a number of insightful observations about us, how we're operating, what we were discussing and why, as well as making some helpful suggestions for things to think about in the future. Page 4 of the Digest report includes a summary of Bishop Tim's remarks for you to read. When we consider the Standing Committee's report on legal and governance matters tomorrow, we'll discuss a recommendation on how to tackle the incorporation of ministry area as an entity within the Constitution, something that was mentioned during the learning community discussions. It's really important we know that the points of learning from learning community aren't lost, and therefore the bench has asked some of those who led sessions at the learning community to represent these sessions at diocesan CMD days for ministry area leaders in particular. You'll see from page 2 of the report that they are buildings, mental health and well-being, training, vocations and exploration of what a healthy ministry area should look like, might look like. It's hoped that this will allow some of the most significant points of learning to be passed on to much wider circles within our province and our dioceses, to allow others to engage with the topics that we engaged with. As you'll see from the report also, the bench has spent some time discussing the attributes of ministry areas and where there's convergence around the province. It's easy to think that every diocese does ministry areas differently, which we do. But they're not as pronounced, the differences are not as pronounced as may be thought, and there are also significant points of convergence as well. The discussions were useful to the bishops. They arose from a sense of the learning community that despite obvious variations between dioceses, particularly in terms of terminology, there was a rising unity in the purpose of ministry areas. The unity of purpose is something that the bishops will work to highlight as we go forwards. Finally, many of you will remember the motion passed by the governing body in September 2023, which commended self-reflection of ministry areas within dioceses. The learning community's discussion of ministry areas was one element of the response to that motion, with a survey conducted in all dioceses last autumn being the other. The preliminary results of the survey were introduced to the learning community, and in January the bench had a more detailed session with the diocesan secretaries about the outcomes. So I'm going to hand over now to James Lang, the diocesan, one of the diocesan secretaries in Monmouth and Llandaff to introduce, in Llandaff to introduce to you the outcome of the survey. Oh, you're there. Well done, James.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop. James Lang, Diocesan Secretary, Llandaff Observer. Archbishop, Chair, Bishops, Governing Body, thank you for the opportunity to present this. The purpose of this presentation is to explain the background to the survey that we just heard, the process we followed, and share some key findings and the actions that are planned in the diocese and across the province. So the motion, after the motion in September 18 months ago, the Archbishop asked the diocesan secretaries to plan an approach. It was ratified by the bench of bishops and bishop staff teams, finalised over last summer and rolled out through September and October in the autumn. It covered topics around finance, governance, structures, and I've lost my place here, and areas of convergence and divergence, areas in common and differences that were in common across the province or differences by diocese. Rather than an impressionistic overview, we asked specific, as far as we could, factual questions to elicit detailed and comparable data, and to be able to offer targeted and appropriate support. We had responses from 109 ministry areas, just a couple of duplicates where it seemed that individuals had put in responses rather than consulting as a ministry area council or mission area council. But broadly, those were MA consolidated responses and an extremely high level of engagement, over 80% overall, and consistently high across the diocese. The structure was aimed to be as factual as possible. Some ministry areas were more generous than others. Some reported that the process itself was useful. Others were slightly less positive. Questions asked for responses to score between 1 and 5, 1 being totally disagree, 5 being totally agree. So any score above 3 is positive. And there were also opportunities within each question for free text references to add any detail and any differences of opinion that the MA might want to highlight. So strap in, we've got a few slides to get through. We'll come to drawing together of some themes towards the end. In outreach, the range here varied from 3.2 to 4.28. Generally positive response. Excellent to see all the good work going on across churches and across ministry areas. On evangelism, the range was 2.64 to 3.62. Slightly more mixed, slightly less confident. Barriers identified included change fatigue, tired, bureaucracy, administration, but some excellent work happening. And as well as some aspirational scoring and some identification of going in the right direction, activities planned but not yet implemented. Comments included things like surviving, not thriving, but also gradually seeing people switch from the warm space to the church. We have some adult candidates for baptism and confirmation coming out. Involvement of lay people, one of the most positive responses, ranged from 3.87 to 4.38. Some concerns, as we've heard, around administration and a struggle to find officers sometimes, but generally involvement of laity was a positive point. On small groups, the range was from 2.93 to 3.79, more common in towns than rural areas. There were examples of good activities, but also quite a few acknowledging that there could and perhaps should be more in this area. New ministry varied from 3.2 to 3.94, so again a positive response. Good. It was identified that this is particularly good when new ministry complements rather than replaces traditional worship, and we heard that again from the Archbishop this morning. It's not an either or, but a both and. Governance levels, one of the most positive responses across the survey. Wide range from 3.2 to 4.5, but all quite positive. When you're looking at it, individuals understanding their roles as trustees, still quite positive, ranging from 2.5 to 3.8, but showing the need for training, for refreshing, and also perhaps that range reflects the structures being introduced at different times across the province. So we know that some dioceses got going on MAs earlier than others. And personal reflection from Llandudno, we're noticing that it's 3 years since we really established the MAs, and we appointed lay chairs, for example, with a 3-year term, so currently going through quite a transition, and so anyone coming into those roles now will need that refresher training, so something we're working on. Acting together, quite a range on this one, 3.07 to 4.63. Some do this really well. Others are more of a work in progress. Again, perhaps a reflection of the length of time they've been working together. Others, quite a few, stating that they are moving or want to move in this direction. But obviously one of the areas where we hope to see strengths in MAs. On finance, this question, I need to note that it's the only question in the survey where a high score was bad. If areas of finance are dominating MAC discussions, that's not necessarily a good thing. We want people to be focusing on mission and ministry. So 3.1 is quite high. It's over the halfway point. Reveals an area of concern. And in the narrative, several MAs made also points about buildings and faculties. We wanted to focus on financial resources. Another thing that came out was that it seems to work well where there is a distinct and separate finance committee within the MA, so that issues of finance are not overwhelming all the rest of the governance or mission discussions on the MAC, but can be delegated to a subcommittee. On giving, this is the lowest score in the whole response, the whole presentation. The range 1.6 to 2.25, consistently across the province is an area of concern. Many MAs, in response to this, to meet their costs, are dipping into reserves, so needing more support in the area of stewardship and giving and generosity, and also asking for more financial support and central funding. Another area where we asked about acting together was acting together financially. A huge variety here from 1.45 to 4. An area that is a challenge for many MAs. Contrasts with the decision-making a couple of slides ago, where we're thinking together was more together at 3.5 on average, so this is 2.6 and below half. It does seem to be better in more established MAs, but even those, there remain some issues. Administration varied from 2.14 to 3.69, so quite a variety, but generally above average. Concerns were expressed about the burden of increased administration, about IT tools not necessarily meeting the needs that they intended, but also that where ministry area administrators are in place, those are very much appreciated. On safeguarding, 3.62 to 4.31, very high confidence in this area, good central support from the provincial team. Some issues were noted in some areas with my church people, but generally there's an area of confidence and feeling of security around safeguarding. Buildings were generally positive again from 3.15 to 4.13. Some of the narrative noted MA's feeling that some buildings are an asset, others are a financial drain. So there can be a bit of variation there. Issues highlighted were to do with costs, repairs, faculty system, but comments were included that the buildings are highly valued in the community and noted the benefits of reordered and flexible spaces. Financial support varied from 2.75 to 3.28. More confidence here where there is a diocesan grants advisor who can help guide and steer MAs in where their grants might be available, both from RB or diocesan funds, but also externally. Recognition that there's more help needed, navigating those and putting applications together. And some MAs express concerns that grants are harder to get hold of as an MA than they were as individual churches. I think at the beginning when in Llandudno we established the MAs, there were concerns expressed around the Welsh Church Act, whether that would preclude, restrict the number of grants that an MA can get to. So instead of getting one per church, you get one per MA. I think we overcame that, but there are similar concerns with other grant funders. On confidence generally, this was really mixed. Scores range from 2.6 to 3.54. We had some narrative that there was a feeling of confidence in God, confidence in the gospel, but challenges are daunting. There were some expressions specifically that we are not confident, but we are optimistic. Another comment I remember from one of the Llandudno responses was that we're confident that the church will continue, but maybe not in the shape that we know it. There were a couple of questions at the end around just general open text about what else we might have missed. Comments here were requests for more money and more clergy, noting the challenges of ministerial share and faculties, wanting support with governance and grants, as I've mentioned, more funding from the RB, training, administrative support, the balance or tension of growth against resilience, and the importance of bottom-up rather than top-down initiatives, listening to what's going on the ground. And there were some comments on the survey process itself and some thank yous from those who had found the process of self-reflection helpful in and of itself. Now we've got a couple of slides drawing together some of the themes as we come into land. On the positive side, there is a huge variety of outreach and evangelistic activities. There is a shift starting to happen from individual churches and former parish areas through to a team aspect of working in MAs. Growth is happening, even if it's patchy and hard to measure, but hopefully the membership app that we just talked about will help in due course. Paid administration and central support makes a big help, makes a big difference. There is fairly strong governance and understanding of safeguarding, so the structures are holding up and helping to resource growth. Having separate committees with specific delegated authority, particularly around finance and property, seems to be really helpful. Buildings are valued and for their role in mission ministry and also as community assets. And there is general confidence from many in the future. In terms of the concerns and challenges, as you would expect from a survey like this, there are a few. Within the ministry, within the MAs, as well as across dioceses and across the province, there's quite a lot of variety, some much more successful than others. There is less confidence in evangelism than outreach, but there's a lot of planning and thought going on for the future. The lack of resources was highlighted in several areas around people, around money, around energy, and suffering under either a perceived or actual increased level of administration and bureaucracy. The parochial mindset is continuing, especially around money, but as I said, there are steps being made in the right direction. Some noted external forces of societal change, and disentangling that from the establishment of MAs was sometimes a bit of a challenge, but is there and is real. Particular challenges in rural contexts with smaller churches and more dispersed MAs. Need for more central support on funding and training and communications. The biggest single issue was around finance, and I think that's something we've got to listen to carefully. And a slight concern about the future and what buildings we may have in the future. So the themes that being taken forward provincially are around finance, buildings, improving systems, technology and processes, and sharing of successes and failures and what we can learn from them. In terms of next steps, each diocese has been given the data and the comments pertaining to its own diocese, so we have that raw data to work through. There are distinct issues and challenges as well as successes within each diocese. And so it is sensible for certain things to be taken forward at a diocesan level. So each diocese is working through the responses and to work out what the appropriate action within the diocese will be. Key themes around finance, buildings, sharing and systems are being taken forward provincially with the bench of bishops and standing committee and learning communities. And we want to take forward any feedback from this session as well. So any questions or feedback, we'll see how we can weave that into these diocesan and provincial ways forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. The presentation is now open for questions or comments, and Bishop John and James will attempt to answer any questions that you raise. Dr. Heather Payne.
Thank you, diolch yn fawr. Heather Payne, elected lay member Llandaff. Congratulations on getting this process to this stage. I think it's been very helpful to hear your analysis. Just to remind ourselves, the exam question here was how are ministry or mission areas working? And so I think we need to focus on the things that have come from that. I have a couple of points about your analysis of the data. It's great that we've got data, and also the numbers are important, and the qualitative feedback is what might be called data with soul, which qualitative data is always often described as. So we have identified the things that have gone well. I think we possibly need to spend a little bit more time on the things that have not worked so well, because that is where we learn. Yes, it's great to have systems which have been positive, but what I'm hearing from those numbers, and could I just say that we would need to talk about giving an average of a Likert scale that isn't whole numbers, because I think a significant number of those were under 3, which is the area for concern. So that's the area to focus on. So we've identified the areas that need a changed outcome. We were all marked low for putting finance as a high priority, but we've now got that at the top of the list. So could I suggest that not only do we focus on the outcome, but the process of learning, because this is learning about making ministry areas work better, but actually the process of learning is about driving partnership by sharing the data, giving people the good news but the bad news too, so that people can actually identify for themselves which bits need to change. Learning lessons from other sectors. In the health service where I work, we've heard about professional curiosity and safeguarding. Again, it's a fundamental skill of being reflexive. How is it working? How am I doing? And reflective on those issues, and actually using the things where there is now a massive area of behavioural insights, how people work together as teams, to derive trust and accountability, because it's trust and accountability in what we do that we can demonstrate that we are trustworthy, we are focused on the 5 marks of mission: tell, teach, tend, transform, treasure, that we are living those. And I think the money will come from our work and our prayers in those areas rather than focusing on the money. So great work. Thank you very much. Let's make sure that we really use it back at the ranch, and let us also capture the learning from this so that we use it transferably everywhere. But thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Canon Willard.
Caroline Willard, elected Monmouth Chair, members of governing body. I want to go back to the diocesan learning community. I presented one of the sessions at that day on vocation and training, and I found the whole process, the whole time we were there, really interesting, if not a little crammed. Part of the feedback that I had was that there wasn't enough time for discussion. And I could tell that because it was actually quite difficult to stop people talking when I wanted to go on to the next part of my presentation. So I welcome the chance to be one of the 4 speakers who will reprise that presentation at the diocesan CMD days for ministry area leaders. However, bishops, on a practical note, apart from Monmouth, haven't had any dates for those yet. Diaries are filling up somewhat, so it would be really appreciated if that could be sorted out sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Archdeaconess and Asaph.
Andy Grimwood, Archdeacon, St Asaph. I hope this isn't a red herring question. It may be in a way. But about a fortnight ago, the Bible Society produced a survey that said that there is a quiet revival going on amongst Generation Z. I was just wondering whether we have any evidence, maybe through the membership app, of that taking place within the church in Wales. If it is taking place within the church in Wales, can we identify the places it's taking place? And are there any lessons that can be learnt from those places that can be applied through the diocesan learning communities to other mission areas in the province? So I hope that isn't a red herring question, but have we seen this quiet revival going on in the church in Wales? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Bob Evans, Lay, Monmouth. A lot of us in this room, I think, share an interest in quantitative data. We like data, we want more metrics, we want more information. This is a simple plea to share this information and any other information we have with those on the ground in the ministry areas. Bishop Tim made the point in his feedback that although we were talking to people who understood ministry areas, we really needed to engage with those at grassroots. And I see this as a very important way of helping those on the ground to develop ministry areas. We're still learning on the ground. We have a lot of growth, we have a lot of diversity out there. The more information we can have, not just about what's happening in our areas, but about what is happening in other areas, will help us to understand. The other point is, I think that actually this information is an important glue that holds us together. If we see what's happening elsewhere, we feel more affinity, we share ideas. So I can see there are sensitivities there, but I really would like us to make an effort to share this information and get a stream of data going down to those people at grassroots. We've got a lot of people out there who have expertise in data analysis, and a lot of the heavy lifting on the data analysis can be done at that level and feed back up. We don't need to do it top down. So that's just a plea for more sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other people to speak other than the next speaker? Otherwise, there'll be the last one, and I'll ask Bishop John and James to respond. No? Okay, thank you.
Hannah Rowan, lay elected for Monmouth Diocese. Again, it's great to see this data, as others have said. I think I want to follow on a little bit from what Heather said, but perhaps going back a step, which is that the analysis is important, but also the data itself and the quality of the data is very important. And I noticed, looking at that quite a lot of the questions rely on a subjective understanding. So, for example, does your ministry area have appropriate governance in place? Well, what do we think appropriate governance is? If you don't care very much about governance, you might go, yeah, absolutely, like 5 out of 5. You know, we tick the boxes, we carry on, we do what's really important. I might not think that's appropriate governance, someone else might. You know, there's a lot of questions around what that really means. And I think it's notable that when we looked at one of the finance questions that was very practical, you know, have you got enough money to cover your work in the next year? Suddenly the score was lower because it was a factual question. And so we can know that we're comparing like with like at that point. And similarly, I suppose, with the question around, you know, how optimistic do you feel about the future? Well, to an extent, that's a personality question, isn't it? You know, that there are kind of one person's optimism might not be another's. It's not necessarily irrelevant to know how, it's important to know how people are feeling. But what we need to be very careful of is that we don't now take this data as like some sort of great truth and spend ages analysing it and then making actions and doing this, that and the other when we might not have understood what we were originally being told. The other thing, of course, and again, having run many surveys, yes, 80% is considered a cracking response rate. It's very difficult to get responses, but that does mean that 1 in every 5 of our ministry areas is absent from that data. We don't know who they are. They might be the people who were on holiday. They might be the people who are so disengaged and fed up with being sent things that they didn't fill it in. They might just have forgotten. You know, we don't know. So I think if we're going to put a lot of store by data, which I'm happy for us to do, we need to make sure that it's telling us what we think it's telling us. And that means we need to ask people exactly what we want to know, and not something that's a proxy that might be interpreted in different ways. So that was the feedback that I wanted to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. if I could ask Bishop John and James to respond.
Yes, I think we didn't quite work out how we were going to do this. The question, the answers and the questions are sort of mixed, I think, as we go through here, James. So if I could answer the ones that I feel I'm able to talk on. When Heather first came up, thanks Heather, you talked about data, but you also talked about learning not just from our own church, but from various other people, various other operations that are going on around the province and around the UK. My thought on that is, and my observation is, that over the 11 years or so that we have introduced ministry areas, the one thing that has certainly been, there's been a standout thing about ministry areas is the quality and the rise of lay people within ministry areas taking positions within church. I think James, one of the questions where we asked about lay people and involvement, that was one of the higher questions. The data was one of the higher data. So we've got people that have come forward that are already in these various sectors, and so we're able to borrow from them. But I do see your point that we also need to go to these various sectors and learn from them also. I'm not sure the best way forward with that. Most of these are observations, so we're going to need to act on them. But that is the one observation I have. As ministry areas have come to the fore, so have lay people, and their expertise from these various sectors has been fed into what we are doing now. Duly noted with the diaries, wherever you are, Caroline. Yeah, duly noted. I'm going to go back and check now. I feel guilty, even though I don't know whether I've got the dates in the diary or not. The Bible Society survey, Andy, that was a really interesting survey, and the results of it were quite shocking in a good way. I don't know how they formed their data on that. All I have is anecdotal evidence of certain churches and certain communities within our diocese that are thriving, especially amongst those that age group in particular. But we haven't got any firm data other than the data from the Bible Society, which shows us a picture across Wales. But we haven't dug down into that to see exactly where we lie with that in the church in Wales. Not that I know of. We haven't done it in our diocese. I'm not sure whether any other dioceses have done that. But anecdotally, we are involved in that in certain churches, certain types of churches in particular. The sharing of ideas at grassroots. I think James was mentioning to me just before we came up that a question that had been posed to him was how can we access this data? And how can we, are we able to access all of this data? And James made a very good point. He can make it himself, I know. But he made a very good point that really any data that we have probably needs to be looked at through the lens of our own diocese first. Because of the idea of divergence and convergence that we've been talking about within the church in Wales. It does mean that each diocese really needs to be looked at on its own merits first by people in the diocese. It's not a secret survey, so we can access that, but just be very careful. I know with Hannah was saying about how we form our data, and it needs to be accurate. Be very careful and remember divergence amongst dioceses means that we probably answer some of these questions in very different ways anyway. So I would suggest that you check your own diocese first, and we begin to work down to grassroots level, like Bob has asked. But I think that's all I've got to say on that, unless anybody wanted to ask any other. But James, yeah.
I think you've answered most of the questions, actually. I think I would say on also reflect on the Bible Society and the numbers point. Hopefully we can track more and more of that through the membership app, as Mike was saying earlier, as we get that more and more traction in the data there. But at our bishop staff meeting earlier in the week, we were reflecting on how Easter had, again, anecdotally, but there were some record attendances as far as we could ascertain in Llandudno this last Easter. So there seems to be a good story, but some work to do to delve into that level, into that data in more detail. I would also say on the formatting of the survey. It went through quite a few different sets of eyes to make sure that it was achieving as far as possible, the objective of the governing body original motion, which was to assess, as what Heather put it, the exam question, how is it working? And that in itself is a mixture of subjective and objective. So we had questions that were impressionistic. What is your feeling, confidence for the future? And deliberately so, you want to get a feeling for how we are. And also mixed in with the harder and more factual questions about finance or buildings or people involved. And I think we got a good range of it, but take the point from the statisticians among us that we need to be careful about how that data is handled and presented. And we'll take that forward at diocesan level to dig into to the level of detail appropriately. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
We move then to Agenda 9, private members' motions. You will note from your papers that there are 2 motions. Please note that if motion 1 is approved, then motion 2 will not be taken. So we're looking first at motion 1, and I will ask the Venerable Rod Green and Reverend Canon Justin Davis to propose and second this motion.
Thank you, Chair. Members of governing body, Rod Green, nominated Archdeacon Llandaff. And just a point of order before I begin, Adrian Morgan, who was originally going to second the motion, is not able to be with us due to a family emergency. So I am grateful to Justin Davis for being willing to step in and second the motion. It is a simple motion to extend the normal term of service for trustees serving on a mission or ministry area council from 1 to 3. I am proposing this motion having had conversations with ministry area leaders and vicars struggling to fill their ministry area councils every year, and with other archdeacons doing their best to support trustees in the fulfillment of their duties in this season of transition and change that we find ourselves in. It is my firm belief that it is vital for the good governance of our mission and ministry areas that mission or ministry area councils that want to move to 3-year terms are able to do so. Furthermore, it is my contention that this should be the norm for our mission and ministry areas, and therefore I want to recommend to governing body that mission or ministry area councils that wish to retain annual elections should be able to do so, but only if they opt out of the default 3-year term of office. Now, why do I say this? Firstly, 3-year terms simplify and stabilise governance. It brings a sense of continuity and stability. Rather than what could be an entirely new council every year, 3-year terms give council members a chance to mature into the role over a longer period of time. This means a lot less anxiety and stress for lay chairs and mission or ministry area leaders, as they only have to think about recruiting and electing 1/3 of the council each year. Secondly, 3-year terms will allow trustees to commit themselves to work through the long-term change that needs to happen in most of our mission and ministry areas. It will encourage a sense of purpose and partnership and increase the impact a trustee can have without having to stand for repeated annual elections. Significantly, a 3-year term of office will also allow trustees to develop a real sense of the mission or ministry area as a whole. So rather than acting as representatives of their churches or even their former parishes, they act in the interests of the ministry area itself, which is, of course, as it should be. It also brings mission and ministry area council elections into line with other triennial diocesan elections. And in these ways, 3-year terms encourage a sense of unity and common purpose, not only across the ministry area, but across the diocese too. Thirdly, 3-year terms allow trustees to make the most of their training. As we all know, trustees now have a lot of training. And the rapid turnover of annual elections means that this training often must be repeated on an annual basis following the election of new trustees. Rather than waste training in this way, it makes more sense for us to make the most of the training over a longer period in office. This is why the Charity Commission recommends longer terms of office for charity trustees. A 3-year term gives trustees a chance to get real experience without having to constantly re-stand for election. It also enables us, those of us who are archdeacons, to bed in and maintain good compliance and governance as we work with trustees in our mission and ministry areas. So the motion has the broad support of the College of Welsh Archdeacons. So to conclude, a new norm of 3-year terms for mission and ministry area trustees will, I submit to you, provide greater stability, encourage a greater sense of purpose and unity, and make the most of the investment we make in our trustees. As medium and large-scale charities, 3-year terms for mission and ministry area trustees better reflect the new structures we now have. So I commend this motion to members of governing body. Thank you.
Canon Davis.
Reverend Canon Justin Davis, Your Grace Chairman, Swansea and Brecon co-opted member of governing body. Rod has already indicated that he's asked me to step in to replace Reverend Dr. Adrian Morgan, who, as Rod said, is unable to be with us today due to a critical illness of his grandmother, who was very dear to Adrian. And for those of you who know Adrian well, and many of us do at governing body, could I just ask you to hold him and his grandmother in your personal prayers. Archdeacon Rod asked if I would step in and second this motion. So I caused myself to have a good conversation with Reverend Dr. Morgan to understand his view of this item. Age and I meet and agree frequently on items as we're both engaged in significant projects in our diocese, although we both work in different ministry areas. Our core is always to make more followers of Jesus. As noticed in my term, there are significant projects, and one reason I wanted to lend my support to this for Rod is where we do have significant projects going on, making sure we have a continuity of people who we're working with in the ministry areas, I think is really important, because they get to know what is happening in the projects. They start to see the life of the project. They start to see the change that is enabled to have, and therefore are willing to sit alongside us and stay with the work that is going on. So I think it is important that we seek to have as much stability as possible. There are many different journeys, of course, being taken by different ministry areas, and we heard about some of that just now. But I do think that if we are able to move into this suggestion by Rod, and I wish to support the motion, second the motion that is given, then I think we will have an opportunity to stabilise much of the work, the good work that has been doing, without any negative effects being caused. I therefore second the motion, Chairman.
Thank you. The motion being duly proposed and seconded is now open for debate. If members wish to make comment, please come to the podium either side. If anybody wishes to move an amendment, please remember that you must first put the motion in the in writing, or email it to the Dropbox.
Amendments at churchandwales.org.uk.
Thank you. So we've got one speaker so far. Yep, please.
Looks like you're only going to get away with one person, so it shouldn't take long. Michael Dean, elected lay, Bangor. I have to say that I cannot support this motion. I think the principle is good, but the reality is deeply flawed. We're running before we're walking. Anybody who has read the Constitution, which I'm assuming is probably not many people because it's a deeply boring thing to read, but the Constitution currently does not mention ministry area councils in any shape or form. We have to rewrite the Constitution first before we can take this motion forwards, in my opinion. The reality is that filling positions on MACs is difficult. In our ministry area, the individual churches elect representatives onto the MAC. In this case, how would that work? If we're going to draw lots, how do you stop an individual church, their representatives who are contributing to the MAC, how do we make sure that that church is not disenfranchised as part of the process? I feel it's well meant, this motion, but I think it needs to be better thought out and needs to be revisited with greater insight into the impact on the Constitution, and I'm afraid I can't support it. Thank you.
Archdeacon of Wrexham.
Hayley Matthews, elected. I would like to support the motion because whilst I can fully understand that we may need to update the Constitution to reflect these changes, many of which have happened almost a decade ago, when I think about the mission areas of St Asaph Diocese. One of the things that is a continual challenge for our laity is the annual meeting and the idea that all of their officers now need to be re-elected, because what tends to happen is the laity feel that they now need to step down and let somebody else come forward, and there isn't another person to come forward. So I would support the motion in the sense that it would relieve that burden of stress from the laity, but I would also heartily commend, as my brother has just mentioned, that we bring the Constitution up to date to reflect that.
Thank you. Yep. If anybody else wants to make a comment or speak to the motion, please can you make your way to the podium?
Tony Wellings, Llandudno, elected. A point of clarification, actually. Because we have no constitution that includes ministerial MAC members, is there an upper age limit to which people would be expected to step down? As with the governing body at 75, would you be expected to step down as a MAC member?
My understanding is that if they are an elected member, there is currently no age limit.
Thank you very much. Because the reason I asked this question, Chair, is if this is passed, I'd be going back and reporting to the MAC. So I need to have all my sort of things, bottles in a line, so to speak. Okay. Thank you.
That would not apply to church wardens.
No, there isn't. Yes. There's an age limit for church wardens.
Because there is an age limit. Yes, Richard? Bob, sorry. Bob.
Bob Evans, lay member, Monmouth. I didn't expect to speak, but I just felt I wanted to make a heartfelt plea for you to support this motion. You heard what I said under the previous item. We're still very much learning on ministry areas in most parts of the province. We need flexibility. I understand from discussing this motion that it's entirely permissive. It doesn't require any ministry area to adopt it if they don't want to. There's a clause which allows them to avoid that, but it does give us the flexibility to extend beyond an annual appointment if we need it. And I think that's really valuable. I really would encourage you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ellis?
Kevin Ellis, Bangor, elected. I too would rise to support this motion. I believe for the reasons that the proposer and seconder have outlined. I understand the misgivings of a previous speaker, but I do believe that at the moment ministerial councils operate as PCCs under the Constitution, and therefore they're already well regulated. I understand the need for the Constitution to be updated, but however, while it is difficult to sometimes find people to want to be trustees on a ministerial council, just having that commitment over a 3-year period would be a wonderful thing in terms of good governance within our ministry area. So please, I would like to support the motion.
Sally Harvey, lay elected from Bangor. I just want to ask the question because a lot of people will have to go back, and if this is voted through, they'll have to implement it. And these may be stupid questions, but I wouldn't understand unless I ask. If you did get elected and then the lot was drawn and you were a one-year member, would you then be allowed to stand again? Or indeed, if you were a two-year member, would you be allowed to, at the end of your 2 years, say, well, actually, I'd like to, and then maybe that time you would, well, that time you would, in fact, be a three-year. It's just how will it, in practicality, happen? That's it.
My understanding is you would be allowed to restand.
So there we are. Thank you.
James?
Thank you, Chair. James Henley, elected Diocese of Monmouth. I'm very much in support of the spirit behind the motion, which is to strengthen our governance, and primarily to do that by giving parochial church councils the ability to extend the term of office beyond 1 year, to be able to enable that length of time that our trustees are serving to increase, to pool that expertise, and to build learning over the course of their term. However, I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion. And what I would like to offer instead is something which is actually even more permissive than the two options which are available in the original motion A. So if you remember, motion A offers the normative 3-year term with the drawing of lots and then a rolling programme of elections over the period of 3 years, with an opt-out clause to stick with a 1-year term. What I would like to offer by way of an amendment instead is the ability for each vestry meeting to have flexibility to agree its own term of office and the procedures for transitioning to that new arrangement for themselves, and the procedures around the annual elections as well. The mechanism that I would propose to do that would be through the creation of standing orders. Many of our parishes or mission and ministry areas already have standing orders in place, which they use to help them to interpret the Constitution and to adapt it to their own local setting. Others, I know, will not. However, I believe that it's an important principle of good governance for any group or committee or council that it has clear terms of reference and it understands what those terms of reference are. So therefore, it seems to me not a bad idea that we amend the Constitution to ask that each vestry meeting agrees standing orders by which it will govern itself. What that then provides is permission and the flexibility which Bob mentioned to be able not just to take the Constitution as is, but to be able to, within parameters, then adapt the constitutional provision to fit their local context. So in many ministry areas, for instance, certainly in ours in East Cardiff in the Diocese of Monmouth, we work on the basis that there are a certain number of ministry area council representatives who are essentially nominated by each of the churches within our ministry area. In our case, it's 2. So for us, looking at motion A, I'm thinking, well, a 3-year term wouldn't actually be the best length of a term of office for us. What would be far better would be to have a term of either 2 years or 4 years. That way, aside from being forced to draw lots to then work out who puts on their length of term, if I had some flexibility with that, what I could suggest to our ministry area would be that we could have one representative from each church that serves a shorter term, one that serves a longer term, and then after that, for every church within our ministry area, they would have a more junior colleague and a more senior representative on the ministry area council. That would work really well for us in our ministry area. It may well be that there would be a different method of election and different terms of office, which would work much better for you in your mission or ministry area, wherever it is, depending on the way in which you have agreed together and negotiated together that you want to set up that mission or ministry area. As has always already been highlighted today, there is a huge diversity of practice across the province now in terms of not just our approach to mission and ministry, but also our way that we undertake our governance and our management of our churches as well. And so what this provision would provide is flexibility and permission. It would provide support because the standing committee would be tasked with creating a model set of standing orders for those ministry areas that don't feel able to produce them themselves, or at least would prefer not to have to work from scratch. And it would also provide accountability, which is crucially important, because if we're going to have flexibility to work out our own governance arrangements, even within parameters, we also need to be held accountable for them. And so those standing orders would then go to the relevant archdeacon and to the diocesan registrar. They would be on record with the diocese so that in the event of conflict or disagreement or the need for arbitration, those would be on record, and the relevant archdeacon would know exactly what they would need to do in order to I think I've run out of time, haven't I, Chair? So if I can just commend that amendment to you.
Okay, thank you. Paper copies, limited number of paper copies have been circulated on tables. It's also now that amendment is available on the online with the online papers for those of you who are following things online. My proposal is, well, my decision actually is that we're going to break now for tea, and we'll come back and then we will debate the amendment first before we move any further. Can you all be back? Sorry, Emlyn. Can you all be back promptly for 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock. Yeah. Thank you.